So I'll often use contour shading to suggest changes in planes or angles on my subject to make some parts sort of curve in or flatten out or drop down. The last thing that I put in, the very last piece, is a little bit of detail on top of that. You put that detail in too early, it'll either get smudged away by your shading or just lock you into a decision that you want to change later on. By doing it at the very end, it really frees you up to make a lot of changes in the work that you're doing. So let's take this whole bag of tricks, especially any that are new to you. Right, so of these, which are ones that you find yourself not using very much? Which are kind of elements that we've talked about here that you find yourself not doing so much? Yes? The three-dimensional blocking. Right, so your personal challenge is to really get constructivist and play with that. Right? What's another one that you find yourself not doing too much? The measuring. All right, so Lena, you're going to be, I want you out there like this, just measuring the jeebers out of things, right? And play with it. Now, you both may decide at the end of doing this, like, you know what, this approach really isn't for me, and that's totally fine. But first kind of mess around with it and sort of see how it can improve your game, right? And then if you want to discard it, that's totally fine. But first really get a feeling for what it is. What's another one that's sort of a new kind of approach for you? So you have to go crazy on negative space, right? So what I want you to do is to sort of step outside of the comfort zone of the way that you always draw, play with some of these new approaches, and see what happens as we mess with this little critter. It looks a lot like a trilobite, doesn't it? This is actually something that is still alive. Horseshoe, yes, that's right. Yeah, but they have compound eyes, just like a trilobite. So let's first, before we start drawing, let's just sort of think about this. What are some sort of measurement or projection lineup lines that can really help with this? Yeah?
There needs to be already a line heading onto it. And then you use the front, the back, and the tail.
All right, so you're sort of saying that you're seeing these sort of, are those the ones you're talking about?
Yes.
All right, so he's seeing sort of parallel lines in here, here, and here. Right? What are other things that you're seeing here that would be kind of useful kind of visualization tools? Yes?
Pardon my ignorance, but you can your brain can see some measurement much different than your neighbor seeing, right? I mean, the distance between something and what stands out by your your vision. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah. Especially if you're looking at a real object from different angles.
Right.
You will all see radically different things.
Sure.
That's a little bit more controlled here on the photograph because we all see the same angle on it. But different people will be interested in different aspects of it, right? Like so for instance, somebody who kind of goes like, "Whoa, check out that tail."
Right.
They're much more likely to exaggerate the length of the tail, right? So that's going to be a personal thing.
Okay.
So this is for you, right? The negative space. So how would we use negative space on this? Sometimes it does. What I'll do is I'll kind of look for some structure within it, and that can really help. See what you think about this. Think of this as a negative space. If I look at it as a shape, right? Here's the actual center line of this thing's body. It's coming down right now, right here. Right? Look at this crescent moon here as a shape. Right? Doesn't that? It'd be so easy to draw this center line right down the middle, like this. Right? And then you draw these little spikes here in the middle. But if you can see that crescent of the negative shape made by the center line and that far edge, and you draw that in on your paper, that's going to make you push that center line all the way up there. So let's block down on our paper. Oh, one last thought. Try to hold off on drawing them spikes as long as you can, right? Once you kind of get into those details, they're going to lock you in place. And then later on, you want to bring that side up. You're going to have all these little jaggedies all over there that you put all these little details into. You're not going to want to, right? If you can wait, you just sort of wait for it, be patient. If you wait for it, right, then at the end, with the appropriate time, you can drop that sort of detail in. Remember, that's dessert. The detail is dessert. You don't have your dessert first, or you're going to lose your appetite for this roll. Now, block this in and sort of play with it. This is going to be here for about 3 minutes. See what happens. The native space of the crescent moon over here, the center line, I find really makes a difference. Not to scuttle away. If you want to drop it in any detail now, go ahead. Just the very idea of saving the detail for the end will make a lot of the drawing process less painful. All this been so far focusing on what are our visualization techniques that help us get the raw structure of this onto the piece of paper. Another thing to think about is that once we've got that, how do we kind of convey the depth and the beauty of it with our line work? And spending a little bit of time thinking about how you're making your lines really helps. We're going to take a look at a few different ways of thinking about lines. First of all, how to make lines, ways of mechanically making lines. And then we're going to take a look at where you would choose to apply those on a drawing. So my first thought is, how many people have had this experience? You are drawing you're drawing a plant stem. So here comes your plant stem. And you get one of these lumpy, wobbly plant stems. Does that happen to anybody else? Wouldn't it be nice if you could get a beautiful, parallel, slender, graceful plant stem without going nuts? Check this out. We're going to take a look at several different ways of making lines. And the first we're going to take a look at are finger lines. All right? So for a finger line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hand down on my piece of paper and just make a little arc with my pen, right? And then lift the pen up, put it down a little bit below that same hand position, and make another line below it. So I've got just with my fingers. Just with fingers, make a set of parallel lines. Right? Can you do that? Give it a try and see if you can make sets of small parallel lines. They'll be short. The trick is not to move your hand in between lines. Now, if you wanted to make those lines a little bit longer, that's going to be a wrist arc. So you're going to put your arm down on your piece of paper. This time you're going to be moving your wrist. You're going to move your wrist in an arc, holding your fingers still. Fingers in the same position, bring it back to the same position a little bit lower, and repeat the arc. See if you can make some parallel wrist arcs. And little straight side branches, perhaps. The motion of your wrist, because you're pivoting around the point, will put a little bit of arc to this. But very often little plant stems have an arc, so then we can turn your piece of paper so that the arc ends up going in the right direction for you. And then to add to this, if you want that sort of slender, graceful plant stem, like on a Brodia, they've got these long, or a buckwheat, these long, thin things coming up. This is going to be an elbow arc. So you're going to put, this is the easiest done on a piece of paper, but if you're sitting somewhere, I will kind of have my pad secure, I'll lock my elbow into my thigh, and what I'm going to do, these are not at a table though, so I'm going to lock my elbow down, make an arc, come back, not moving my elbow, and make a parallel line right next to that. See if you can do that. Give it a try. And lock your elbow down, give your elbow a permanent place to live. Can you make an elbow arc? How'd that work for you? Right? But still, these aren't straight lines, right? We made circles before. Because I can't even draw a straight line. Would you like to be able to make a straight line? Here's how. Just don't bend it. So the secret for the straight line is, all right, I want you to shake your shoulders out. Right? Right. Right. Loosen up those shoulders. Right? Because these are going to be shoulder lines. Shoulder line. You're going to keep your hand relatively in the same position, your wrist in the same position, so your elbow's not going to be wobbling all around. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be moving from your shoulder. Right? Move from your shoulder and see, and you move from your shoulder. Your hand is not dragging on the paper, so your arm isn't up. Move from the shoulder. You might first, just in the air, do kind of, all right, I can do this, and then pick pencil down and go, draw a straight line. Much better? It's hard to make two thin parallel ones with this because there's no coming back to the same pivot point. But you can make straight lines. With shoulder lines, you can also make big, smooth, gradual curves. Alright? You can, if you try to make a bunch of curves with, have you ever tried to do this, like make curves with a bunch of little finger lines? And you get these very kind of tentative, jerky, jumpy little lines. Right? So these are trying to make curves with finger lines, but try it with your shoulder. Kind of loosen your shoulder up, and just see what happens by moving your shoulder around. If you can make confident, smooth curves. So see what shoulder lines can do for you. These can make, these lines have a very different feeling than the ones that are made from play with that a little bit. See what happens when you draw from your shoulder. There's one school of thought that you should do all your drawing from the shoulder. And for me, like I sometimes, in their small picture and I am making a smaller line. But if there is a line that I can make with a larger sort of body movement, sort of splicing together several little finger movements to make what could be a wrist movement is going to result in a much less confident line. So, next time you're sitting in the dentist's office, get a piece of scratch paper and fill it up with finger lines, wrist arcs, elbow arcs, shoulder lines, smooth shoulder curves. The more you kind of kinesthetically get used to drawing in all these different ways, instead of doing everything with just little finger pulls, your drawings will have much more strength and confidence to it. Because you've got more of a, this allows you to make a smooth and confident, clean line. The last thing we'd like to do today is to take a look at, alright, so here's some tricks on making lines. Where on your drawing are you going to put those? Here is a drawing of a skull. I would argue that this skull is visually very confusing. The locations of the lines are accurate, but because they are all of even weight, it's hard to understand. We're making life difficult for the person who's trying to get information from it. What's really going on back here? What's happening there? I don't know. Right? What's happening here? What are you trying to say? This is a confusing drawing. There's a couple of different ways of handling my line that'll really clear this up. What it involves is putting variation into my line work. Sometimes my lines are going to be light, sometimes my lines are going to be heavy and dark. Right? And by having that variation in there, I can make my drawings much more clear. There's a bunch of different ways of doing this. And I'm going to show you three different ideas that you can do with sort of how you are kind of using different line work. And here's the first one. Here's number one. This is called a line hierarchy. I've got some lines that are heavy, some medium, some light. So in this, I have, sort of with an architectural style, put a heavy line all the way around the outside of my drawing. I've also used a heavy line to outline some of the major features of this. Like this zygomatic arch right here, the jawbone. And then I've got some medium weight lines for things that aren't perhaps as major important structures. Medium weight line right in here, medium weight line here, medium weight line going here, and then some very fine light lines for some of those cracks and fissures in the skull. And I would argue that this, because of that variation in lines, is easier to read than this character. So this is just a line hierarchy. So I'm thinking of what are my major features, I'm going to hit those with bold lines, my secondary features, and then my lighter features. That's one way of doing it. Here's another. So on this one, what I've got is there's line variation in this one, but within a single line, you notice like the outside edge here is not all a bold edge. I'm using heavy lines to note a couple of different things. There's two things going on here in this. One is, I'm actually suggesting sunlight. I'm suggesting light coming in from this side, this area up here, light line, even a broken line where the sunlight gets in. Then kind of coming over to the edge of this eye orbit where I drop into shadow, I'm going into a darker line. Here on this zygomatic arch here, look at this. Light on the top where the light might hit, darker on the bottom where the shadow would be. You can suggest shadow with a dark and a light line. Another thing that's going on in this picture is that I'm trying to suggest the depth, what's close to me or far away from me with my line weight. If I press harder and make a darker, more bold line, that is going to make that part of the drawing feel closer to me. A lighter line recedes. So, right here, around the front of this orbit right here, it's a bold, heavy line. Notice that the things that are behind it are lighter lines. That's intentional. I want them to feel further back. Here, big, heavy line, stuff that is going further back is lighter. This line coming around, connecting in here, lighter, coming to a heavier line. I could have made this bottom edge of this dark to be like, the light side and the dark side. But then if I made this really, really dark and bold, it would pull that edge forward, and that would be visually confusing. So I left that as sort of a medium weight line so that this part here would feel like it was closer to you. So I'm playing with ideas of line hierarchy, light and shadow, and near and far with all these lines. Here's a line hierarchy one, the sort of midline of this. That's kind of a light line coming down there. All those cracks, I'm handling them lightly and loosely. So I can put all of those together. And those are considerations I'm making when I'm actually drawing my lines. That's why I love to have this whole kind of, all the problems of where does this line go already worked out when I go to draw my lines in. So I'll do all that kind of underdrawing, kind of blocking things in, making it measuring and the gestures and kind of narrowing in on it, or using that kind of constructivist approach and making the boxes on the nose. I get those things worked out, then I can come along with my lines and be much more sort of bold and confident, and even make a shoulder line over here. Because I already know where those lines go. So all of that is kind of going on behind the scenes when I'm making my drawings. As an overview, we've got a bunch of tricks in your quiver of ways that you can visualize things to get them onto your piece of paper. Then when you've got that, we have a number of different sort of body mechanics of making our lines and different considerations about where we're going to place those lines on the drawing. My last thought, you can do this. And you can. This is just a skill. This is a skill that you learn by doing it. The more you do it, the better it gets. This is your brain. Right? You're 2 or so pounds of electric meat. And it connects out to here's your hand with your pencil. All right? This is you. All right? The more that you do this, what happens is you are sending signals back and forth between your hand and your eye. The more you do it, the more your brain starts to lay down specific pathways for this activity in your brain. The more you do it, the more of this new brain material, specifically for this action, your brain will create. This is called neuroplasticity. What you're essentially doing, by repeating, drawing again, drawing again, drawing again, you are making a neural superhighway through your brain for this activity. If you have not drawn since elementary school, this is a tiny little thin path. Well, just with 1 year of walking that path again and again and again and again, you could really build this up so that whatever your eye sees, your hand flicks in response to. And it's a learnable skill. It's not a gift, it's nothing magic. It's no sort of special gene, right? It's just a skill, like making a good omelet, right? And you can learn how to do it. And the trick is to get yourself to start to do it again and again and again. So, I've got homework for you, right? What I want you to do between now and the next time that we meet is you owe me 7 drawings. 7 drawings playing with and incorporating these techniques. Get yourself to mess around with these different techniques, especially the ones that are kind of a little bit odd or new for you. If at the end of the day you decide you don't want those, that's okay. You can discard them. But a lot of people have found a bunch of these things really helpful. So see what is, don't just kind of do 7 drawings the way you always do 7 drawings, but really get yourself to play with some of these new ideas. And see, is there something new for me here that I can incorporate into my personal game of how I am drawing that will strengthen the way that I'm drawing and sketching? I want to encourage you to share those on Facebook, on our Nature Journal Club Facebook group. They will really inspire other people to kind of do it themselves. And if you see other people doing that, cheer them on, let them know what parts of it are really kind of connecting with you, sort of support them. It's a risk to kind of put yourself out there and do that. We've got to really give honoring props to those people who are taking that risk. So give it a try, mess with this. Just listening to this lecture or watching this lecture on YouTube is not going to do it for you. What will do it is just get yourself to do it again and again and again and again. That repetition is what's going to build up your electric meat to be able to handle this task of you see something in front of you, you want to get it down onto paper. Lastly, have fun. Be gentle with yourself. Right? And